Hello everyone, welcome to today's class. In today's class, we'll be having an overview of the 12 principles of animation. Many people, when they teach these principles, they teach it from the angle of what you need to do to make your animation look better, and much more um, making it look better, making it have appeal. But I don't think that is the result. Well, I don't think that is what these 12 principles of animation are. First off, these 12 principles of animation, for me, the way I approach is that I broadly categorize them into two groups. One is the category that has to do with, you know, the good workflow one should adopt while animating. One has to do with the workflow that we should adopt while animating. Then the second is it's a thought behind movement, how objects interact. That's the theory behind how objects interact with one another, how movement occur, how objects interact with one another, and they interact with their environment. There are some law of physics because we are trying to replicate life, right? So there are some laws of physics. There are some principles behind all of this that we need to take cognizance of. For instance, the squash and stretch, right? There are ways that objects squash. There are ways that object stretches. So while animating, we now need to have all of this. We need to be very observant. Now, one of the very soft skill as an animator we need to have is observation. Observation is key. All of these principles is actually they were actually lifted from a book called The Illusion of Life, written by Disney animators Ole Johnston and Frank Thomas, which was written to provide guideline to Disney animation style. However, these principles in the book now have not is now accepted worldwide and now used worldwide. For instance, Richard William, the author of a very good book for every animators need to read. Apart from this illusion of life, every animators need to read this book. There's a video, in fact, you need to watch the video also called Animator Survivor Kit. Now, Richard William borrowed plenty of his principle from this illusion of life. Now, the first principle we'll be taking a look at is called squash and stretch. This is how objects behave and interact with its environment based on its mass and weight. That is, a heavy object will bounce less and a lighter object will bounce more. For example, a basketball bounces more than a rolling ball. For instance, you can see with this demonstration here, there is the way this golf ball is interacting. Interesting enough, right? When you hold a golf ball, you would not have believed that it will really squash and stretch the way it's doing here. In this four ball is the one at the left, the extreme left there. You wouldn't have believed that it would behave as is squashing them. Then the other one is the one at the top is the one at the top is the one at the top is tennis ball. You can see also how it's behaving too. Then then the one at the right, extreme right, is like a balloon ball. You can see how it's also behaving. Fundamentally, the heavier the object, the less the bounce, the less the squash, and the softer, the more the squash. So you can see it's being demonstrated here. This is a heavy bowling ball. You can see it has less bounce as different from this soft ball that bounces more, as different from the ping pong. ball also. You can see that bounce more. Then you can see this bubble, how it's behaving, like being swept by air here and there until it bursts. Then squash and stretch also is not just about all these balls alone. It's also, as I said, it's about how objects behave on this planet Earth, right? Especially the live objects. For instance, as you can see here, this is someone's face. You know, when we are excited, when we are angry, there is plenty of squash and stretch happening in our face. You can see here also, there's squash and stretch happening with this person when he's getting up, when he's trying to get up, right? Here now, there's some level of squash happening. With all the examples that I've shown you so far, the bounce ball, the ping ball, how to achieve all of that in especially if you're focusing on motion graphics, that is just using basic shape to tell a story. So you can see how that plays out here with this ball. But mind you, this principle, right? Once you understand it, these are just fundamentals, these are just basics, right? For instance, I just showed you how this face, right? So you can see once you understand, you can apply it to things like maybe let's say you are animating a face, right? You can see, especially when it's not like it's a hard um, object. This is like a natural body, right? It's not like it's maybe a tank or something. This is a natural body, so it will observe that um, this principle of squash and stretch. In this whole idea of representing squash, that an object is interacting with its environment, and is also showing us how much of in time, right? How much of velocity, how much of speed it is at a point in time. Now, animators over time has also devised a, a technique called smear and blur that animators use to give that sense of, oh, this object is in speed, is in motion, right? So there's that squash, there's that this thing happening, but this is a unique way of doing that called smear. So here you can see the Simpson, you can see this other cartoon here having this smear. So it's called smear. The idea is that it gives the sense of, okay, this particular thing is in motion, is in speed. A good thing to note is that while observing the principle of squash and stretch, you don't just squash or you don't just stretch things anyhow. There is a principle that it must maintain its volume over time. For instance, now let's take this square, right? Once it squashes, right, it will maintain its volume over time. That's you find here. Okay, this is a stretch in here. That's if it stretches, right, then it needs to reduce the x axis. That's its x length, right, which is called yes, that's the length. Yes, the length expand, right. Then the height should decrease, right? Do you understand? The That's the x value now increase, then the y value should decrease in proportion. The y value should decrease in proportion to the x value increasing. All of this is to because, for instance, this face now that we showed, though it also now depends the style of animation, but if you are keeping it real, right? Since we've been able to have a way to squash this face, it should in a way look bigger as opposed to when it's been stretched. So that's just the basic rule to observe why so that you wouldn't. Well, it all some style also permits one to, you know what, to break that law of physics, to break the when the style permits you to like go overboard, right? However, in on planet Earth, the way it works is that if something is stretched, let's say you are stretching it, right? That's the x value is increasing, then the y value should decrease in proportion to that, in proportion to the x. Then the next principle is ease in and ease out. When an object moves away from the position of rest, now the the basic law of physics, right, states that every object by default are in rest except compared, right? So normally when an object moves away from that rest and goes into motion, it doesn't go with just full force. Rather, it accelerates. It moves gradually from the rest, then goes to full acceleration, then later it eases into rest. That's it eases out, then eases into rest. Now get the time I just used, because this used to confuse me a lot. It used to confuse me a lot because before I felt that okay, ease out, right, should mean the last thing that is happening, right? Rather, when you say ease out, in other words, you're saying is easing out of rest. That's it's starting to do something. It's easing out of rest. Then when it is eases in, then it is easing into rest. That is, it has started a particular motion, right? Then it's now easing into rest. Now that's very crucial for you to understand, because when we start going into when we start going into animation, all of this information comes to bear. Now, a very good way to demonstrate this is they have like a car or a motor, right? A car doesn't just once it starts, it doesn't just go to full speed. Rather, it takes its time to build acceleration. Then later on, right, it now eases into rest. However, mind you, I said that in general, this is it, but there are some other objects that doesn't follow this pattern that I just described. For instance, if we were to have a bullet, we wouldn't have it easing out of rest. We wouldn't have it easing out. Rather, it comes out with full acceleration first off, right? Then later it will now ease into rest. So a golden rule to observe here, or how it works, is that with this diagram you're looking at now, is that let's say or everything happened under 1 second, right? Rem- Now, by default, traditionally, the way motion picture is arranged is that we have 24 frames per second. That's 24 images for every second. So right now, this is a typical case, but this one is 25, right? This is 25 we are looking at now. 25 frames we are looking at. Now, the way arrange we arrange the frames now, the top one there is arranged evenly. That's at every frame. It's arranged evenly. But the one in the bottom, it has more frames, right? At the beginning, not too far from each other, not too far from each other, not too far from each other. Then when you go to the middle, they were farther, very much farther. Then when we got to the ending, They are now very, very, very close. Now, this form of arrangement, what it eventually does is it gives the idea that this object, while moving in time, is out of rest, then eased into rests back. So that's the idea behind motion picture, right? That's the idea behind video and motion picture, is that you arrange objects. They actually stay, right? Because they are played in time. Then that gives the idea that okay, oh, this thing is moving, whereas they are not actually moving, but our brain now pieces everything together. So how you now arrange them, if you have them closer to each other, right, they will look very smooth. They look very smooth as compared to when they are wider apart. So when they are arranged closer, they gives that sense of ease. There's the ease movement happening. Now this is how this this whole idea of making it close, making the frame close to each other, and making it far apart from each other is also there's a way it's represented in animation softwares. Because before now, how the old guns, the old guys in animation, the way they achieve this is by drawing. Then they draw. But the software we are using now, they've made life easier. That though there are now parameters we need to adjust to still give us that effect to for us to have control of that. So that parameter is called animation curve. Now, whatever software, Maya or 3D, Cinema 4D, whatever good software you're using, it allows you, it gives you this control, the animation curve. So right here, what we are looking at is that we find there's one called linear. You find so how this line now is arranged, the behavior of this line, the way it's arranged now, we now determine if you are making the the at each point in time, if you are making it the frame very close to each other, that is the frame, in other words the object itself also, if you're making them very close to each other or you are making it far apart, right? That's if you are very making it close, you are easing them. So for instance, the first one is called linear. Everything is just everything was just organized, was just arranged evenly. So it just goes evenly all through, like linear, it's just linear. As opposed to the one called power ease. So there are plenty. So here there are plenty frames arranged very close to each other here at the beginning, arranged very close to each other at the beginning. However, when we now go closer in the middle to the middle, there is like a huge gap happening. So we find the objects somewhat snapping away from the middle. Once it gets to the middle, it snaps into the other side of the it's just snap just away from the middle, then goes to the ending here and lingers very much more. That is the in the ending, the frame right now, the object are arranged very, 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 very closer to each other. Now we have this is out, is in. So you find it here that okay, you find here that okay, at the beginning, you can see the curve too. So it's you find in the ease out, ease in, you can see the curve just rises. There's no easily in it rising to the top. There's this ease in rising to the top and also coming down, right? So what that gives is that okay, once it's going from this particular once it's going from this particular place to this other place, it does that with ease. The third principle is the principle of arc. Most human and animal movements follow an invisible arc or closely circular path. So also does thrown objects and projected objects. There is a particular arc when you do a breakdown of how movement occurs. There's like an arc or circular path that they follow. Only robots, right? Only like it's only robots what is actually mechanically designed to have the ability to move at constant speed, at constant manner. So you find this principle at work in when we are working. At work when we are working, in our every of our movements. So they come to bear in our cycle. Also, the run or walk cycle of animals. The you find this okay. This is the human feet, right? The way we move. And the good thing with animation is that it helps you to observe, be much more observant about movement. Before now, right, you wouldn't have been taking this data when you see people walk. It was when I was paying more attention on work cycle, I realized that people's when they are walking, their head tends to go down, up, down. Before then, that whole idea would just be you would be seeing the data, but you won't be able to recognize. You won't be able to like assimilate. But with that's what one thing animation does. It makes you to pay attention more. This is Mushu in the Mulan cartoon. So you can see when he hits the distance, when he hits this thing on his head, there is this circular part. So does all the cartoon. Also, it's also crucial to know whenever we are doing our head turn because this is very tricky here. You may think like when I turn my head, you may think I just turn right, but when the when you actually look closely, you will realize the head while on that process of turning came down a bit, like the one you have here. It came down a bit in the middle one, the middle post or the middle frame. The head came down slightly a bit, right? And also closed. Yes, where we've studied it, animators have studied and realized that whenever a human or also animal they are turning their head, they usually bats, they usually close their eyes. So this is also how it plays out in in motion graphics. Whenever we are using shapes, basic shape, you find that in the bouncing ball to in order to give it that realistic feel, as different from if it's without an arc, it starts looking mechanized. You understand? Well, sometimes this may be what we want. This may be what we want. That's the one without an arc, but that will be we going out of reality, not so much paying attention to the physics, the natural physics that occur here. Except maybe something is also compelling it to move without an arc. The fourth principle is anticipation. Now, the way movements occur here on Earth and with the law of physics and everything, before we take any action, right? There's a normally there is that build up of we we build up energy. For instance, this person is about to this character is about to throw. Okay, let's say he's a golfer. He's a golf ball person. He plays golf, right? He's about to throw. So before he throws it, he builds. He's first of all build an energy by going back, by stretching. The amount of anticipation, the amount of energy he takes to build, determine to a large extent will determine how far this stuff is about to throw we go. So there's that build. The first one, I want to throw. I'm about to throw the middle post. Then he throws it, right? So, like as I said, for some teachers, they just tend to go through this as okay, as a way to just prepare the audience that okay, I'm about to do this. Yes, it's like a theatrical concept in the theater. Before you do anything, you need to prep the mind of the audience. I'm about to do this, and that's what anticipation is. Like I'm about to do this before I do this. Yes, there is that in terms of it being a presentational style so that the action is not missed. However, if you take a closer look, by default, right, though in it might not be exaggerated in cartoon, for instance, now here that it might not be exaggerated in that the build up action might not be exaggerated. Yes, during presentation we need to exaggerate some things to like make the message clear. However, naturally we do that. For instance, if you want to get up right from your seat, you don't just get up immediately. There's usually there's usually that need to build up first. Like you need to slouch a little bit more before you now get up from the seat. So also you find here somebody wants to hit a hammer. Let's say this hammer now something. He builds the energy. He doesn't just go straight. Yes, well I think we can actually go straight by consciously making the effort, but naturally a we build the energy first before we hit. So now this is what the cartoonists they've now taken. They've known this and they've taken this and they've like exaggerated it. For instance, they have this duck, Donald Duck, Donald the duck rather. Before he before he zooms off, right? So you find this in cartoon, in Tom and Jerry, every cartoon. Before they zoom off, because if they just zoom off straight, we'll be like, what just happened here? But they needed to prep our mind. For some they will like rotate, 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 rotate before they go. So it is, right? I'm about to do this, I'm about to do this, I'm about to do this. Then he goes. So that's what anticipation is. So my point is that it's both presentational and also is a natural thing. So whenever you feel that okay, you know what, I'm not doing this, just know that there's a particular natural order about how movements occur on Earth, on this planet Earth, that you're not paying attention to, and this is how it translates to in motion graphics. Just when we use our basic shape, so you can see this one before it does the actual jump, it built up energy. It went back a bit. It went back a bit. It just went back a bit before it now did the jump. The fifth principle is follow through and overlapping. Whenever an object, usually smaller in size or and weight, is attached to another, that is the main body, we observe this principle happening where the body part that is now called the appendix first drags behind the major body, the main body. It drags whatever action the main body is doing, right? The other one will be like, we'll be like, we'll be dragging it. The other one will be like, you are taking me to this place again, and you are carrying me to this place again. It's as if the appendix, right, is a bit stubborn, right? Not following. Well, it's like the principle we observe in parents and children. Yes, that is it. That is what is even happening. The main body is the parent. The appendix is the child. And you know how children do. That they take usually is when you want them to do something, they usually take time to do something, right? So it is like the major action that the main body is performing. This other one will take time before it follows. The interesting thing now is that when the main body has finally done that and is settled, The child takes time to catch up. As the appendix now, the smaller body that attached it takes time to catch up before it also now settles. As it goes back to rest. So that's just the principle. Just know, just that's just how this principle works. So, for instance, here we have this cap now having this appendix having like a pull. So you can see when the head tilted, right, turned, it took a while. It was like, you started again. You started dragging me again, right? That's what this pole is saying. Then when it settled, it then took a while for for the pole on the head down, on the cap down, to also settle. So you also find this is the natural law. Now you find this person, let's say this person fall down. Now all of these principles are very good when you observe them in your animation. They will like make your animation pop. You make your animation pop. Let's say this character fall, right? The whole body don't doesn't just fall at once. If that happens, becomes mechanical, becomes mechanical. So that is not what happened. Rather, for instance, the leg took a while to catch up where the major body, that's the torso now, what the torso has done. So also we find this flower here. We find the flower pot as the major body, then the flower as the appendage. It's trying to catch up with the major body. So this is a also using making use of basic shape, right? How to also achieve that with in the sense that if you are doing motion graphics, so you can see at a time, right? This other part of the body took a while, like slouched, right? Then when it hit the ground, then the other part took a while to now also settle with it. So that is called overlapping, and the other part is just following through the major action that has just happened. And the next principle, the sixth principle, is secondary action. Now, mind you, this is my sixth principle. It doesn't mean that okay they follow a chronological order. No. And also, I would like to say this: realize one thing, that all these principles, they don't. Many of them, they are in, they are interwoven. Many times when you're talking of one particular principle, you also find the other at work also. Secondary action are gesture that we do, or action that we do to like support the main one, and this helps to add dimension to the character. Like this helps to like give a much more detail about the particular action. What do I mean? For instance, let's say we have this particular action here. The main action here is the man stamping his feet. Is angry, right? So with stamping his feet, that's like the major action. That's the major thing we want the audience to take away from here. However, to now support and make that whole message sink, we'll now add this arm swing. The arm is now swinging. Now the nature with which this arm swing also shows how much of anger the man is experiencing, right? How much of that, and also the other, that's the torso being slouched and everything, his face. So all of those are all adding up to tell us how angry is this man now is. So we also find here there's this major cube doing his own performance, right? Is now also being, is also carrying this order. or that little cube. So the little cube is the secondary action. Why the major? Because once we remove this, right, to still give us the idea that okay, this is what is happening. The seventh on my list is timing. Timing really means the intersection of number of frames, the intersection of number of frames and spacing. Though just with the word, you may think it's just okay about time, the amount of second, the amount of frame it will take. For instance, we have 25 frames here, which is equals to um, which is equals to 1 second. 1 second for this coin to perform. Okay, two of them right now for these coins to perform their action. You may think, okay, that's just it, the time it is. No, but when the principle of time, it also take cognizance of how they did perform the action. For instance, the first one, the one up, right? You find it just going at constant speed, right? It's just going at constant speed. Whereas in the second one, you find that there is initially there is easing happening in the at the beginning. Remember when we spoke about ease? There's ease happening. What does that mean? The drawing, the frame are very much closer to each other. There are frames here closer to each other. Here, as opposed to in the middle. So what we have now is that after in the middle, in the beginning, it will go slow, then goes very fast, then goes slow again. Whereas this one will just continue at a constant speed. Also, the basic principle of timing is that if, for instance, we want this hammer to swing, right? If at one frame, right, at the beginning, we mark, we put it, let's say it's starting from here, then at 1 second, I have it fully swing down. That's my first action. Then, but in the other one, I have I have it start in the same place, but I extended it now, not to 1 second, but 3 seconds, right? Now, at the end of the day, this will happen faster. The 1 second one will happen faster as when compared to the 3 second. The 3 second one will take a little, much later. It will be much slower to happen. About this is how this is a technique to once you understand this timing, right? How what I just explained now, it means that if you find a line here, it means that okay, there's a framing happening here, there's a framing happening here, there's a key framing here. In After Effects, there's a key framing happening here, then also here. So there's a key framing happening here, then there is another happening here. There's another, but with this, right, it means that it starts off. You can see the gap between the first one to the second one. So it means that it will be like going from here to here. It will happen very fast. There will be a jump from this first one to this second. Then at the end, there are now there are plenty of frames happening, so it will look smoother. But here there will be jump. So also something similar here. It starts off. So in this 1, 2 to 3 and 4 and even 5, they will be like jump, right? But from the sixth to the seventh to the everything starts smoothing out. So that's the principle also at play in our eases here and in our spacing. Now, you know how the the people playing music, they know how to read notes, right? So we also need to this principle, we also need to understand it. So when we look at this, we understand that okay, this is out. This is out. We understand that at the beginning, right? You can see the keyframe, the frames are arranged. The frames are arranged very, very much closer to each other. But in the beginning, in the middle, they start spreading out, and even yes, it's spread out. So they become even from the from the middle. That's from the 12th frame down to the 20th frame. So what we now have is that there's the ease out. There's ease out happening here. As at the beginning here, it's gradually it smoothens out, then it goes fast. It goes slow from the beginning, then it goes fast. So it also here too. So we can read this now that okay, at the beginning there is happening, is smooth, is slow. In the middle, it builds speed, it start going, then later it now settles, also goes slow from this 15, from 16 to goes a little bit slow. So that's how to read. That's about timing. So you can see the first one here is just linear, everything are arranged evenly. But the this other one, the ease in, right? At the beginning, you can see there are gaps, and it at the ending there is now easing. That is the ending. It will go slow at the ending. Yes, in this second one, there is the easing in that it eases into it eases in into rest. That is, it eases in into rest at the end. This first one, it eases out of rest. That's at the beginning. It eases out of rest. That's the frames are arranged very close to each other. So here you can like have the diagram, both the diagram and the because the internationally and when we have like people trained animators when they are communicating, right? Sometimes it's just this charts that they will just send, right? And when you look at it, you understand, and that's the same thing. Now, this chart I just showed you now, many animators, they don't take out their time to learn this, right? And yes, the good thing is that once you learn it, you can once you they send a chart to you, once you look at it, you understand what needs to be happening, how the movements need to. So the way it plays out now, all of those chart that we just read now, we find it at play here. We find this particular one, right? Is so we find plenty of the drawing. This let's say the plane here, right? We have plenty drawing here close to each other. So at the end of the day, it will go slow, much more slower and smoother. You find it going slow and smoother as compared as opposed to the down one here, the jet here, which is happening very much faster. Because why? You can only find like one, two, three, four, 5 frames at the same time that this other one is also the same time that this one has to complete its action. But the one in up has plenty frames close to each other. So it will give that sense of being much slower. So the next principle is straight ahead and post to post. Now, this particular one has to do with workflow methodology. That is the best workflow to use. Now, the principle states that it is best for whatever action, well, it is best for whatever action, try to do, break your action down into key. For instance, we have this person coming to pick up this chalk on the floor to write. Now, before we go into details, and we need to now break everything down into what is called key poses. For me to tell this story, what are the major things? So we have the key pose of him, the establishing shot of him coming in. That's the key frame of him coming in. Then he picks the key pose of him picking the chalk, then writing. If we play this alone, right? If you just play this alone and someone looks at it, our brain will fill in the gap. Now, that's what is actually happening in motion picture. Our brain fills the gap. We don't tend to see that okay, all of this are merely are merely still images. Rather, our brain pieces all of that and put it and play it as one continuously. So even if this is just the okay, we have him coming, the next thing is speaking this, and the next thing is writing. Our brain will fill in the gap. We will understand what is happening. So those are the key poses. Now this method is better than you just trying to draw straight, because once you do that, once you start drawing straight, you may lose focus. You may now lose focus of what at the end of the day, what how the this thing will look like, we end up looking. Then once our key poses are done, then we'll now go. We see the what is called the breakdown pose in red here. We now go back to add those ones, what are called the details, to add them. So for instance now, I want this character, this ball character to jump, right? I don't just go and start. Rather, I focus on I find the first frame, the third frame, the fifth frame, and the eighth frame. I have it slouch. I key that pose. I have it come back up. I key that pose like stretch. So this is squash and stretch happening here. I have it stretch. Then it takes off. Then later I'll now go back and start adding all of these other ones. As opposed to when I just start, just going at everything at once. Now this is the possible error that one might run into when he starts just doing straight ahead. He started, the character was big here, then the next thing you've lost some details. Though this is just exaggerated, very much exaggerated, but that scores the point that you might lose some details with the character at the end of the day, and that might not be too late for you to catch up, for you to now go back to. However, straight ahead are very good. They are the best method to use we are doing whenever we are doing like particles, explosion, water splash, and all of that. So there's a key term here to know about post to post. There's, as I said before, now there is a key pose which is in red here. For instance, we want this person to jump this. So the key pose is the one in red. So it starts here and is there. It started from this point and is in this other place now. Then we have extremes. We have extreme that helps to add more details, right? Then we have breakdown. The extremes are the one in blue. Then we have breakdown are the one in yellow. Also add extra details again. Now, the interesting thing is that if we were to remove these yellow ones, that's the breakdown, right? And just add the extremes, the action will be understood, very much understood. But this breakdown is just to like give much more detail. Then the next principle is exaggeration. Exaggeration is the art of making the attribute of our subject larger than it would in real life. We always want to try to push both our poses and our timing as far as we can to emphasize the attitude, the emotion, the weight, the force, also the forces influencing the figure, so that they become very clear to the viewer that this is what is happening. Right. So for instance, we have this guy hitting another person with pan without it can without the exaggeration in the one on the left, right? It sends the message across, right? Okay, he hits the distance, but with exaggeration, you can see the force of impact. You can see the anticipation frame here being built up, right? Being taken to the extreme. Also, when he hits it, right? The guy also responding. You can see he went down like he shouted. You can even hear with that exact because of proper execution of exaggeration. You can as if it's as if you can hear the him shouting here, screaming here that someone has just killed him. So that's what exaggeration is taking. So you find here. So though you find some level of absurdity in that types of cartoon to like score this point. For instance, you find this the cat now being this disfigured here, the head, because we wanted to exaggerate that the head now is like is screaming its head out, right? So the head is now taken to the extreme here. The next principle is called the solid drawing. Solid drawing is giving our character a strong sense of weight and then balance, a strong sense of dimension. In character design, we take note of food that occurs as a result of character weight and being three-dimensional. But when we are working with rigged puppets, that's with our character now, we talk about when we're in a 3D space now. We, with this, we're talking about solid pose. For instance, we're talking about clear silhouettes, how to position your during the course of animation, how to position your character that this thing is clear. The action that is carrying is also clear. So for instance, you find this character. Is that before you can see okay with this particular image here now, okay, this is like a monster looking human figure, right? And that is it. Though it sends the message across, but there's some level of depth that this character is missing in this character, as opposed to when we now have other extra, just little, all these little details that now gives it some sense of volume. That is, you can see in the arm now, there's some overlapping happening, there's some fold happening here. So you can see, so with that, it gives some level of, so, but in our emotion graphics that has character, right? This is a typical case of motion graphics, right, with character. So you can see the principle of solid drawing happening here. You can see it happening here. For instance, see this lady, okay, let me take it to this place. Okay, you can see the overlapping happening between. It's clear there is a shade, there is a shadow being cast here, being cast here, that gives us the sense of depth. Okay, see also this person collecting hammer. The second leg wasn't just taken through the first leg there and left to just be blue alone. Rather, they made sure that there's a shadow cast both down here and just a little bit here. And you can see it in the arm area. So all of this, and yes, there's one happening here. So all of this adds up in giving depth to your character. Yeah, and you must take cognizant of this to like make your animation, your character look much more three-dimensional. So here we find this other person trying to wave now. You see there is a shade happening on his leg here to like make it pop. Imagine if he's not there, it will just look very flat. It will look very, very, very flat. So we find here too. So this one has to do with environment now. You can see this bridge being brought down, right? Underneath it, it has a different shade. It's actually totally black here, as different from the other part of the bridge that is being brought down. That's being brought down here. So this is how this principle of solid drawing is achieved. Yes, this is how it's achieved. Okay, this is another example too. We find this lady now coming, being inside this water. When the leg are close to each other, right? We now have a line going through to like demarcate, okay, that this leg is different from this, to like give the leg form, to like gives the leg, okay, the leg is it has form as opposed to just being flat. Yeah, our next principle here is staging. Now, the principle of staging, a lot comes in place. Like we have a lot to when we're talking about staging. There are some, to a large extent, are very much specific. Okay, when we're talking of exaggeration, though there are many things coming together to form it, but we are being specific of okay, we are taking this action, we are taking it to, we are kind of taking overboard in order to send the message. That's an exaggeration, right? But this staging, we have plenty thing coming in together. Staging is a presentation of an idea so that it is very clear. To achieve staging, animators put into consideration plenty of other factors like clear silhouette, proper anticipation, camera angle, acting, setting, etc. This principle can be likened to the layout in graphic design. That is how you arrange everything so that your story is told effectively. How you needed, how you also need to exaggerate things. What are the things? For instance, the cat I showed the other time, right? What was the major thing that was exaggerated? That's the head. Imagine. So the idea is that okay, it is screaming its head out. So that is like example of staging. So instead of emphasizing some other parts, rather the head was the major focus. You will use close up, that is, you zoom into your character whenever they are portraying some form of emotion. They are trying to tell some form of, yes, expressing some facial. There's some facial expression going on. There's some level of expression, emotional expression going on. You need to zoom in to capture that. Whereas when they are like performing, jumping there and here and there, that's, yes, performing, interacting with their environment. You take it. you give it a long shot. There is what is called the principle of the rule of third. The idea is that you break your you break your screen into three equal parts, right? And set them either of these two lines. Then you can now put your environment at the back and all of that. The idea is that it's much more appealing to do that. Well, they've studied that, study have shown that it's much more appealing. Also, staging also has to do with, some level of exaggeration, as we said, okay, focus, right? For instance, if you want to tell, if your story is saying that, okay, this house is a poor person's house, go by all means, go focus on that. Focus on that. If that is what that scene is saying, the environment, the story that the environment wants to tell, then focus on that and take it to the extreme. Take it to the extreme. Like, yes, exaggerate on that. Don't bring other things to start distracting. So take it to that. At each point in time, you also need to define what are we focusing on? What do we need? For instance, you can't, when this person, this character is looking right at something, if our focus is that okay, he's looking at something, something is searching for, then it makes more sense for us to take it to this order, the left hand, to the left hand, and give him breathing space, the room to look at, to look for the thing, to give us that sense is searching for something, right? So all the space in the right hand side is telling us that okay, he's looking for something, except when the focal point is not so much of what he's looking at, but that okay, he's looking but he's missing out on a particular thing happening at his back. So at this particular time, is no longer the major, is still part of the action, but it's not the major action here again. Him looking is not the major action. Rather, there is another main actor now coming in. Yes, whenever actors are talking or also performing, giving their performance, give one, except maybe you want to overlap it a bit. Sometimes overlapping the action is a bit, but overall, this principle is that if this action is happening, for instance, the person, okay, want to tell the story that okay, this person got he wasn't looking, so as he was coming, he wasn't looking, he stepped upon banana peel, and that's made him to fall down, right? So at each point in time, and people started laughing at him. So at each point in time, so with that, we need to break that down. The key process are okay. He comes in, right? There's a banana, right? Then he mistakenly step on it, he falls. So we need to at each point in time perform that, finish that before these people start laughing. Not that everything will just be chaotic or there's a dialogue. Give this person time to finish talking, then give this other person time to talk also, and not just mumble everything up. Then the 12th principle is the principle of appeal. Appeal is the inherent charm or charisma in the animation. That's in the animation, in that's the overall animation, or that also has to do with posing, and that also has to do with character design. This doesn't mean cute anyway. It doesn't mean cute. It means because you can have villain, you can have monsters that have the appeal. The idea in appeal is that how much at the end of the day, because appeal has to do with when we now add all these principles together, how successful are we in sending the message across? How successful is now the performance? How successful is now the animation in who? Both in character design, in making the character solid, both in the acting. Okay, when we needed to exaggerate things, do we exaggerate? The idea is okay, after seeing watching the animation, is the animation memorable? For instance, I have this villain here. I maybe I will always remember this character. I always remember this character. This the witch from Sleeping Beauty, I believe. The idea is that this character is very strong. You can imagine the design and everything, and yeah, the acting also, the animation brings to mind. Okay, another one is the Tom and Jerry, right? So you can see Jerry here being shocked. Like most of our parents and even me will forever remember Tom and Jerry. Why? Because they had this appeal. They were successful in both their action. Okay, take a case study here now. He was being surprised. So you can imagine how successfully this action was achieved. Him being shocked that they went to there's an overboard here. There is exaggeration happening here. And its eye popped out. I don't. I can only imagine what is happening here. So these are other characters that's like for me stand the test of time. So also for your character and animation, because before we start talking about animation, animating the characters, first off, we need to focus on the design first off, because no matter how, if the character is poorly designed, no matter how you try to animate, right, to a large extent, it the animation is already carrying an inherent flaw in terms of design. So the key thing to look at is that you need to, for instance, you need to each of your character need to have a unique feel. Need to have a unique feel. For instance, you have this macho person here as different from this other big guy, as different from this smaller one, as different from the diva looking female character. So appeal has to do with, okay, how does your character first off stand out before you're not talking of the animation? How does the animation stand out? And all of this has to do with putting all these principles that we've spoken together. So see you guys in the next class when we start, putting all of this theory, all this principle into use in animating.